Welcome to The Rest is Giant Robots, a conversation through the careers of writer Simon Furman and artist Andrew Wildman. Recollections and revelations about the highs and the lows as creatives in comics, books, games, film and TV.
Okay, so here we are again.
Here we are again.
Again, we're sort of back on our regular track of sort of proceeding through the years of our career this time, and then we'll return to our Q&A thing next time, which we didn't get even halfway through.
No, that's good that we didn't get halfway through. I was wondering how far we'd get with the questions, but you can always dig so much out of them, can't you? Because it kind of jogs memory and all that kind of stuff.
Mm. And some lead to other kind of answers and digressions. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's good. We've got another one of those to do. And as we always say at this point, do send in your questions to the Patreon page. We will endeavor to answer them all.
Yeah. And if we don't know the answer, we'll make something up.
Yeah. So this is our little preamble video viewers only bit before we kick off into the podcast. We're going to
Mm.
be rejoining things after the fall of Dreamwave, which was our last progressive podcast through the
Mm.
ages, through the years. Ages. Feels like ages.
Feels like
Through the eons of our career. But yeah,
oh
so
God.
we'll continue on into, what was another reasonably lean time as I remember it. But, I've had to really sort of scrape the memory bank to work out what I was working on at that time, because
Mm.
definitely was working in between Dreamwave and IDW. So it just took a while to go back through and see what
Mm.
I and we were working on.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to put your finger on it, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
sure some
yeah, no, I gotta say, only, with some strangely with the US comics, everything I can track, but it's all the little bits and pieces like Action Man and Atom and other
yeah.
sort of UK stuff of this era that I slightly lose track of.
Yeah, I guess I suppose one way of doing it big to go back through your accounts, isn't it? Look at what you're invoicing. Well,
Well, that's true. I might even have accounts that go back that
that
far
might
as
be really
well.
disappointing. There'll be just massive gap in your invoices as well.
Yes.
Yeah, 2004,
Yeah.
nothing.
Yes. Well, no, 2004 wasn't the issue. It was the first half of 2005 that
Right.
things got a little iffy, and I guess the end of 2004 because I just didn't get paid for a bunch of Dreamwave stuff I did and 3H stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I ever suffered anything like that. Don't think I ever had any no payers. I'm sure I have in the past, but no.
Yeah, that's my only two. So yeah, I mean, some things just stopped, but very rarely without being paid in full for what I'd done.
Mm. Yeah. That's the life of a freelancer.
It is. Anyway, shall we go for a record?
Yeah, let's do that. Whose turn is it?
I'm not sure. It might be, well, I don't know, actually, is the answer.
What number are
Let's
we? I don't know
number
what we're
15,
doing.
episode 15.
15, is it? Okay.
Yes. Okay, well, why don't you start us off?
Okay. Okay. Hi, welcome to episode 15 of The Rest is Giant Robots. Amazing. We've reached 15 and so much more to come. My name is Andrew Wildman, artist,
And
and
I'm Simon Furman, writer of assorted things, but a lot of Transformers along the way.
yeah, I get bored of saying it all the time, but maybe I want to just have a pre-recorded bit.
Yes. Yeah, writer of stuff.
Everybody knows who we are, and we like to keep the rest as a surprise anyway, don't we? So,
I like it that maybe some people don't, so we can say, "Don't you
hmm.
know who I am?"
Yeah.
But at
I have to say,
intervals.
I have to say that quite often, even to members of my own family.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I often, I have this thing where if I'm just sort of meeting people socially outside of the comics, animation, art, writing biz, and I tell
Mm.
people what I do, I either get I get one of two reactions. One is, wow, oh, I love that stuff. That's brilliant. Or this sort of glazed expression and that thing at a party where you look for sort of excuse to move away. So
Yeah, yeah.
and lots of people just don't remember, even if I tell them what I do. The next time I see them, and it's you're kind of in, and it's I'll explain it all over again.
Uh, The most bizarre kind of example of that. Yeah, like you say, you talk to some people and they get it. I mean, certainly these days because there's a lot of presence of Marvel. So there's some, you know, I can remember back in the day when I used to say that I did comics, and the in England that very often the reply was, "Oh, what like the Beano?" So it's like,
Yes.
well, yeah, kind of, but then you have to go into a whole other explanation about the history of comics.
Yes.
But the most
It's e
bizarre one I had was I met somebody and I was chatting to this is years ago. I met somebody and I was just chatting to them, um, and it was a few days before I was going to a comics convention, and I said I was, I'm going to be going to a comics. They didn't know who I was or what I did, so I didn't tell them, but I can't remember the circumstances. Anyway, I said I was going to a comics convention, and there was, general chatter. We just chatted away, and it turned out that this person thought I was a comedian, and
yes. Yeah. Yeah. I got a lot used to get a lot of people thinking I wrote for the newspaper strips, the three panel cartoons like, I don't know,
yeah,
Modesty Blaze or The Perishers or something like that. That was what they thought comics writing was.
yeah,
But yeah, it's one of those ones where yeah, either people get it and they're very excited about it, or like I say, there's this polite glaze and oh, I
yeah,
must go over there. Oh, I just need the toilet, excuse me, and off they go.
yeah. Yeah, the storyboarding thing is quite interesting because, I've got a couple that most people have heard of. The one that most people, kind of respond to is Doctor Who. If I say a storyboard,
Mm,
say a
yes.
storyboard artist, they go, "What's that?" And then I tell them, and they're like, "Would I have seen anything you've worked on?" And I say, "Doctor Who," and they're like, "Oh wow."
Yeah.
Although these days not so much.
No. But I
Oh,
mean, yeah, oh, Doctor Who. Yeah. But back in the day, yeah, you're right. Doctor Who was one I could drop in and people at least would have a frame of reference for. But
mm,
back in the day, or where we are in our sort of recap, Transformers didn't really mean much to the general public. But
no.
now I can say it, and everyone
Mhm.
knows what Transformers is because of the live action movies.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I've met a lot of people in the entertainment industry, TV and what have you, because we're so old now. That a lot of people working in the industry are, they are a lot younger than us.
Mm.
Um, and so when I get chatting and I say, oh, I used to do comics. Oh, what did you do? And obviously they've heard of Spider-Man and all that kind of stuff. But Transformers is the one that when I say that, they're like, oh, I used to read that when I was a kid. Oh my
Mm.
God, I probably read some of the stuff you did. Because
Yeah.
Transformers in some ways has like a broader presence because of the toy thing. People do
Mm.
remember it. Most people of a certain age remember the adverts and the kind of
Yeah.
title song words and all that kind of thing.
And
So
there's
that's
been
that's
so
always fun.
And there's been so many of those kind of 80s nostalgia programs of
Yeah.
late that, yes, everybody has sort of rediscovered their inner sort of Transformers fan, if you like. And
Mm.
yeah, it's a lot more. I can say I write for Transformers, and apart from, oh, what, the movies? No, not the movies, but it at least it has that sort of recognition now, thanks
Yeah.
to, bless him, Michael Bay and those movies.
I know. I know. Yeah. Yep.
So, before we move on, I kind of wanted to do a couple of little pickup points from our last couple of podcasts, and the first one was, if you listened to our Q&A last time, both of us were asked what property we would have loved to have worked on, licensed property that we didn't get to. And
Mm.
really funnily, both of us went for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as something we'd have liked to have written or drawn. And I blithely said, yeah, one of these days, only to find when I checked my old blog entries a reference to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Fast Forward, which must have been the show at the time,
Right.
Titan comic that I did some writing for. So there we go, completely blanked from my brain that I had written Turtles.
Even your own work doesn't make an impression on yourself.
But and it's funny, we'll talk about this later, but around that time there were a lot of UK comics work that was, Atom and Power
Mm,
Rangers and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that, it slightly in my brain has chronologically needed some sorting out as to when
mm,
these things were and who they were for. Some were Panini, some were Titan.
mm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, they all do slot. Like you say, they all slot for me as well. They slot into the kind of lean period. Purely
Mm,
because I was looking around for other work to do. So I was approaching all sorts of people about potentially working on different projects. So yeah, I did bump into those. Certainly Atom, I had a strange experience with Hasbro around Atom but yeah, yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
well, we'll get into some of that. That'll be good.
Yeah.
Right.
And you've got to pick up from our Dreamwave, Fall of Dreamwave episode, haven't you?
I have, yes. Um, find it
We
again now.
we
What's
we were well, we were while you're doing that, we were asked, or we wondered ourselves whether Dream Engine, which is what Dreamwave and Pat Lee and Roger Lee became after Dreamwave imploded, had
yeah.
actually done anything as that company. And Andrew,
Mm.
you got a response from one of our listeners.
Yeah, I got a message from Adam Groves, who we often bump into at Transformers conventions or whatever. So hi Adam. Thanks for your message. So Adam said, "Hi Andrew, loved episode 13 of the podcast. Ah, to think what might have been if you with you guys at the helm. I have some info about Dream Engine for you anyway. They did a couple of mini series for Marvel, such as an X-Men Fantastic Four four-issue book drawn by Pat Lee, and also Pat Lee drew the Iron Man books for the House of M story using the Dream Engine logo in the credits. Hope this helps. Yes, it did. Thank you, Adam.
It did, yes. So, interesting that they were more or less subcontractors to Marvel at that time, which was kind of a bit what Marvel did with Image for a time.
Hmm.
So, yeah, so interesting to know that there were Dream Engine books out there, even under the Marvel banner, but I'm not sure whether anything else continued after that for Dream Engine as an entity.
Yeah, yeah. Hey ho. Good while it
Yes.
lasted.
So where we left off, we were pretty much, sort of, it was around Christmas 2004 that I got the news finally, even though we all suspected it, that Dreamwave had gone under and had filed for bankruptcy. And that left me, A, at a slight work loose end because I'd been flat out with Dreamwave, and
Hmm.
B, a little financially compromised because they had gone under owing me money for work I'd done, and so had a few months before 3H, the original BotCon comic publishers. So,
Hmm.
it left me in a slightly difficult position as we sort of come into 2005, where I'm not sure what work I had. And in fact, as we were saying in our little preamble bit, I sort of went back and had to work out quite what I was working on around that time. And I realized, while we were talking about Dreamwave, other things had been going on, such as the image behind me for our viewers is of the cover to Transformers: The Ultimate Guide, a Dorling Kindersley book, which I'd written the entirety of, really, and that was in 2004.
Mm.
And that was a big job. I'd forgotten how much work had gone into that until I actually picked up the book again and started leafing through it.
Yeah.
And how much, because again, Hasbro weren't the sort of, they hadn't got the sort of law and underpinning tenets of the brand locked in then. So with the Ultimate Guide, where we didn't know something, I just kind of created it for the book, if you like. I put a lot of stuff in that was just, well, we don't know this, so let's map I we did a whole map of Cybertron for a start.
Oh, wow.
um, yeah, I mean, literally as a globe of the planet.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, though I'm not sure, either Guido or Don Figueroa did the art for it.
Mm.
And, a lot of the Dreamwave artists were doing the sort of new original art for the Ultimate Guide. Don did an amazing Unicron transformation and Primus, which we'd never seen before, as if he had been a planet at some point. So
Right.
there was some amazing art in there. But yeah, lots of stuff. I just thought, well, I don't know. We don't know much about the prehistory of things, so I'm just going to make it up. And
Yeah.
that's largely what I did. And things like this concept that I think at the moment Hasbro are basing a lot of their product around, of the 13 primes, these original 13, sort of slightly mythic sized prime beings,
Mm.
was a something, it was a concept just got thrown into the Ultimate Guide as, this is what happened. This is how it got from Primus to 13 primes to Optimus Prime
Yeah.
via some other primes. And, it was great in a way because we just had that latitude to create, the stuff now that's now part and parcel of the whole Transformers mythos.
Yeah. And have you then subsequently in stuff you've done, have you used the stuff you made up just as a
Yeah,
filler?
very much. I mean, I still reach for the Ultimate Guide
Yeah.
when I need a reference, but it's my own reference material as much as anything. So yes, I look back and I go, okay, yep, okay, we established that there, and that's how the geography of Cybertron jigsaws together. And recently I was working on a game called Transformers Reactivate, which sadly isn't coming out. But
Mm.
for that, a lot of the stuff that I was feeding to the game writers and the designers was coming from the Ultimate Guide and other sources. So I
Mm.
would send them the map of Cybertron, the way bits of it jigsaw together, how the Sonic Canyons work, and things I just sort of put in there. I thought this is great because this is just being perpetuated into different iterations of Transformers, be it games or comics or books. So
Mm.
yeah, I was drawing on my own, Ultimate Guide as a source for the game developers.
Yeah, well, if it is the ultimate guide, it's the ultimate guide, isn't it?
Yeah. And what's interesting is they updated it 3 years later. So the first edition came out in 2004, and then I did an updated edition 3 years later. So
Mm.
of course, by then Dreamwave, were the current publisher, weren't anymore, and we had IDW. So, you can literally see the transition between the two editions.
Right.
Dreamwave gone, IDW in between that time.
And so the updated version, was it like a reprint but with just
With new,
updated
yeah,
stuff? So
yeah,
so IDW had use of all the stuff that Dreamwave had done then originally.
Yeah, I mean, it was all owned by Hasbro. So, you
Right.
know, basically, Dreamwave didn't own anything that had been established in any of their comics. And I believe IDW reprinted most of the Dreamwave stuff in new editions.
Mm, mm,
So yeah, it all rolled on, and yes, we got in the updated edition of the Ultimate Guide. I could include IDW as the new publisher of Transformers comics.
mm,
I
mm,
don't think I went back and tinkered with the Dreamwave one at all. So I think it was just here's the new publisher. I don't think we got into, the kind of crash and burn nature of the end of Dreamwave.
No, no, no. No, people don't want to know about that. Well, they kind of do, but it doesn't.
Yeah,
do-
yeah, it didn't fit in a sort of licensed proper product anyway.
Yeah, yeah, good.
And one other thing, sorry, before we roll on, I hadn't I'd forgotten, or I hadn't forgotten, but that it was around that time I wrote a Doctor Who audio adventure for Big Finish.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And that was an experience in itself. I don't think I'd ever written at this point for a non-visual medium.
Oh, right.
So obviously these are audio adventures. There's no
Mm,
visuals to fall back on.
mm.
And I remember being, staring at my screen. And yeah, it definitely was around that time because it was in my office in Chipping Norton and thinking, how do I say there's a big purple tentacled monster coming over the hill without someone saying, oh, look, there's a big purple tentacled monster coming over the hill? And it was just really weird. I don't think I'd ever had to sort of think my way around getting the information over without,
Yeah.
be it screen images or comic images.
So did you listen to other stuff that then it was kind of clear how you get that information across?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
Gary Russell, who drove the Big Finish audios, sent me a bunch of stuff to listen to,
Mm,
on CD at the time.
yeah.
So, but I did, yes, absolutely. As always, if I'm coming into something new, you sort of, condition yourself, you soak up other examples of it.
Mm,
And yeah, I sort of listened to several and just thought, yes, you've just got to do it in natural conversation because the whole
yeah.
thing is conversation.
Yeah.
So, you have to find ways to say, what people are seeing in dialogue. But I
Mm,
found it difficult. It was
mm.
my only one, and I just kind of knew I wasn't a natural fit for it.
It's a bit like, I mean, you see it in TV, even in a visual medium, the very often it's written so that the dialogue that the characters are speaking are telling you what's going on or like explains bits that you don't
Mm,
understand, you know. So, and people wouldn't say the kind of stuff that they,
no.
but just kind of, yeah, using the dialogue to explain what's going on. But yeah, it must
Yeah.
be
I mean,
tricky to make it sound natural.
yes. And I'm not sure how well I succeeded, but, generally the feedback I got, it was called The Axis of Insanity. And lots of people liked it. It was a Peter Davison, so hang on, is that fourth Doctor, fifth Doctor
Mm.
adventure. And it was really fun. He was one of my favorite Doctor Who's.
Okay.
You've kind of got the one you watch as a young kid, which was Patrick Troughton for me, and
Yeah.
then the one that as an older viewer you just really liked, and I really liked his version of Doctor Who. So when I think Gary must have just said to me, which Doctor would you like to write of the classic Doctors? And I went for Peter Davison, and I got to go along to one of the recording sessions for it,
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
which was absolutely so cool. Little studio in Brixton.
Mm.
And I went along on a Sunday, I think it was like a Sunday morning or something. And Peter Davison was there and Nicola Bryant, who plays Perry. uh, who I've met subsequently at conventions and things. But it was just, kind of wow, these people are going to actually say my dialogue out loud while I lurk in the sound booth. And there were some very talented uh, actors there. Peter Davison kind of turned up in his what I call Sunday gardening jumper. Sort of okay. I mean, it's audio, so no, nobody was in costume or anything. And as we did the sort of first read through, it became patently clear to me that Peter Davison hadn't read this before. He isolated his bits of pages with his dialogue on it and was
Mm,
just reading them. And
yeah.
everyone else I thought was doing a bang up job, and every bit of techno babble and doctor language, he was sort of not exactly falling over, but not quite getting right. And so they did the read through, and Gary, who was in the sound booth with me, just said, "Right, go for record." And I'm thinking, really? I'm not sure. Anyway, obviously, consummate professional that he was, once we were actually recording, it was bang on. I've
Oh,
never
wow.
seen it go from, to flawless Fifth Doctor in
Yeah.
just one take. It was
Yeah.
just brilliant to watch, and kind of thrilling. Peter Davison was saying my dialogue out loud. It was
Mm,
a great experience.
mm. Yeah, really cool. Did you do any more? Was that the only one you
No,
did?
that no, that was the only one, and it wasn't that I couldn't have gone back with more ideas. It's just I think that was a very busy year, 2004, and I just
Mm,
thought it sucked up so much time
mm,
to
mm,
do. Or I'm very glad I did it, but I kind of thought this isn't the best use of my time, if you like.
mm. Yeah, yeah. Fair enough. Well, nice to have done one, and yeah,
Yeah,
great,
yeah.
great, great. I remember when the TV show that I created with Simon Jarrett, the Shane the Chef thing, I went to
Mm,
one of the voice records of that with Russell Tovey in the recording booth,
mm,
yeah, doing it. And it's just great to see these guys perform, you know.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's and we've seen it, haven't we, at Transformers conventions and the like, when
Mm,
they do the audio dramas live at the
mm,
conventions, the voice actors, incredible to watch them do it. So talented. And Scott McNeil, one of the Beast Wars voice actors, who did
yeah,
about three or four different roles, he
yeah,
was incredible because they were all highly stylized voices. None of them were just his voice with a bit of gravitas. They were
mm,
all sort of things like Waspinator, who had a sort of buzz in his voice,
mm,
and Rat Trap, and so he just he put 110% into his voice performances, which was great to see him do live. But
yeah,
one of the audio dramas, he was playing about three different roles in it, and there was one page of script where he was flipping um, from Waspinator to Rat Trap to somebody else, Silverbolt maybe, and when we did the read through, he just sort of almost banged the table in submission at having to sort of jump so quickly through those characters. But he was great. They were all
yeah.
great.
Yeah, I wonder what he's doing now. I always used to think with those, like you hear them on the cartoons and all that kind of stuff. They are the character; those are the voices of the characters that you're watching. But when you see those voice actors, doing that stuff, I remember seeing Scott do all of that, and remember thinking, "What the hell was he like as a child? I bet it was an absolute nightmare, wasn't it?"
Yeah. And he's still an amazing character. I bumped into him at one of the newer BotCons a couple of years back, yeah, about a couple of years back. And he's
Yeah,
still an incredible character, very much larger than life.
yeah, 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 yeah. Good for him. Amazing,
Yeah.
amazing thing to do. Yeah.
So 2005. as I think I sort of mentioned, I was struggling to work out what I was doing back then. Once Dreamwave had gone, and before IDW, I mean, we obviously were scrambling to put our pitch in with Titan, which we've mentioned
Mm,
in our Fall of Dreamwave episode. But I'm trying to work out, or well, I was trying to work out and look back and find what paying work I was doing at the time.
mm, yeah.
I mean,
I
can
mean,
can
for
you
me,
think?
yeah. I mean, I know the BKN stuff was um, Legend of the Dragon. I mean, that's 2000 and that's around about that time, 2003,
Yes.
2005. And I did a couple of other projects for BKN in London, in which I think were 2005. Oh God, I don't know, it's just
Mm,
weird, isn't it? A weird time. I think that's when we first came out of the idea, not you and I, but when myself and well, initially myself and Leslie came up with the idea for Shane the Chef, which,
mm,
many years later ended up on Channel 5 Milkshake. Um, and I was trying to pitch that around. I was trying to get work as a children's book illustrator. I was like just trying for anything. So,
mhm.
visiting publishers and trying to put together portfolio pieces, but it's all just, I don't know. It's
Yeah.
not,
No,
I
I
don't think
mean,
there was much going on at all.
I don't think there was. It must have been one of those slightly not maybe as bad as when, you know, all our Marvel work disappeared and the comics industry imploded. But
Mm,
I certainly feel it was one of those, oops, what am I doing? Where's the next main work coming from? But I did
mm,
dig in and I found another couple of things that I'd forgotten about, really, as well as that one episode of Legend of the Dragon I worked on. I also
mm,
did an episode, maybe two, of a thing called Alien Racers, which was another animate CG animated show which
mm.
must have come through Bob Forward.
Right.
So yeah, that one I'd somehow completely zoned out on. But before we jumped onto the podcast, I looked online, and you can still find the episodes just to
Oh.
watch. Which
Yeah.
that said, which one I did, I have no idea. It didn't list credits per episode. So yeah, if anybody knows which episode of Alien Racers I wrote, please do let us know.
I mean, presumably there is some kind of online database that you can search by writer name. I don't know.
Yeah, it should be. I mean, I don't know
IMDb,
whether
is it on there?
it is, but it's lacking a lot of synopsis and
Oh,
information. It's
okay.
not it's not a full entry, if you like. But yes, somewhere it must be out there.
Yeah. Or it's just been
But
forgotten and buried. Nobody
yeah,
cares.
yes, nobody cares. Well, I obviously didn't, Sad to say, it's just gone. But yes, so there was that, and we both worked on Power Rangers at this time. Excuse me,
Mm.
I believe,
Yeah.
because
Yeah, I remember doing Power Rangers and I've still got packages of the artwork. So that was, yeah, so trying to get things into context in some kind of order in my head. The Power Rangers artwork that I've got was done on animation papers. So that was obviously as a result of me working at BKN in the animation studio.
yeah,
And for a long time after that, all the comics, any comics work or even illustration work that I did was always done on animation paper because I could get one sheet, sketch it out in blue, stick a fresh sheet over the top on the light box, and then just like carefully do it in pencil, in really sharp pencil. Um, so that it didn't even need inking, and all the Power Rangers stuff was done like that. There weren't any inks. It was just scanned and then high contrast, sort of adjustments. Um, but I enjoyed that. I enjoyed
yeah.
Power Rangers.
Funnily enough, I did too, and the comic was called. I think it was a group comic called Jetix, which who were producing the Power Rangers cartoon. I think it was.
Mm.
And so there must have been other things in there or other Jetix shows covered.
Yeah.
But yes, the strip was the Power Rangers. And it's one of those things that had somewhat passed me by, really, Power Rangers. And
Yeah.
yet once we got into it, I think we had good fun with that.
Yeah. It's just one of those really um, kind of group dynamic things that you see in lots of things where you've got a group of almost like archetypes as characters, easily kind of all the same, but easily identifiable by costume color difference.
Mm.
And that really is something that you see in a lot of different places, and they always work really well. They always, even going back to Thunderbirds, they were all kind of the same, but they got different color sash.
Yeah.
It's Well, Spice Girls, they all tended to have a different kind of color ident, some key color that would
Mm.
be part of their costumes. But Powerpuff Girls, all those kind of properties, it works really well. But the thing I liked about Power Rangers, and I've used this in talks that I've done at universities and things, where I talk about different kind of properties, and it will be, I talk about Transformers and Spider-Man, whatever, and I use those as an example of some philosophical or psychological points, trying to get them over to people. And Power Rangers is a brilliant one to talk about something being greater than the sum of its parts, where each character is kind of perfect on their own, and as a group they're powerful as a group, but when they combine into the big kind of robot thing that they're riding around in, it's bigger than the sum of the parts. I mean, it's just a nice little kind of narrative metaphor that's as old as time, really.
I never really went a bundle on the TV series, probably didn't really watch Power Rangers. It just sort of passed me by. But when we came to do the comic, I think I slightly reappraised it
Mm,
and just thought, oh, this, as successful things often are, is really quite straightforwardly, simply clever
yeah.
in concept.
Mm,
And, like anything, it's then what you do with it yourself. Everything's a challenge. That's the way I see whatever I work on as
mm,
a writer. As, you know, it may be it may be Rugrats, it may be Power Rangers, it may be Atom, but whatever it is, you find the things in it that sort of inspire or excite you, and hopefully that translates to the reader then.
yeah, because as very simple concepts, the ones that are the simplest concepts, you can find like what's right at the heart of this. Like, what were people trying to get across when they first put this thing together? Because characters and things are just a vehicle to be able to tell very often the same stories, but with a different kind of, just kind of dressed up differently. But yeah, you're right. And then you'll pick up on something that is like, oh, that thing is really cool about this story.
Mm.
Whether it is with Power Rangers, whether it is just the team thing, or whether the ridiculous kind of monsters and things that they're always up against. It's like just go
Mm.
crazy with that, or whether it's the relationship between particular characters, there's a lot to play with.
Yeah, I mean, even something like Turtles, it's a kind of bonkers concept,
Mm.
but
Yeah.
but you can't really approach it like that. You have to sort of go, what's the sort of the real integrity of this concept?
Yes.
What is it that, you know, speaks to readers? What will it make it relatable to the
Mm.
reader? And so, yeah, nothing is intrinsically naff. It's just you've got to, and I'm absolutely not saying that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or anything like that is naff, but you could
Yeah.
be handed something that is, at first glance a bit sort of basic or, straightforward, and you have to dig down and find, as you say, what that sort of core concept is.
Yeah, very much so. I can remember. when Care Bears first came out, not the comic, but I after I left college back in 1982, myself and three other people set up a design studio, because that's what I trained as a graphic designer. And the guy who was kind of the managing director, and he was the one that had got some kind of history in the media and whatever. So he was the one bringing the work in, and he went to the first big launch of the Care Bears product.
Mm.
I think it was in some castle in Switzerland. I don't know, some bizarre location where they launched these things and had this whole kind of marketing thing to bring them to market. Anyway, he thought it was a fascinating idea, and I've always thought Care Bears is a
Mm.
fascinating idea. And then there was the comics and stuff like that. And I can remember being in a pub in London with some other UK comics creators, and I always they were always a bit sniffy about it because obviously they wanted to do superhero comics or Thundercats or Transformers or whatever. And I used to say, yeah, but you can't overlook these powerful products. They're really powerful. And something like Care Bears has got all these intricately defined characters. It's just perfectly designed, whether you like it or not. But I used to say I'd love to see what Alan Moore would do with something like Care Bears.
Yeah.
Not some kind of dystopian piss take, but just like they're just characters. But what would you do with them? Just the same
Mm.
as any other characters.
And sometimes simple is best. I saw a little retrospective on the Wombles. So, I think it must have reached some anniversary, and
Yeah.
they had the son and daughter of the creator talking about it. And, it's such a simple thing. It's like, you used to walk across Wimbledon Common, see the rubbish, and think, okay, here's a little message. I mean, A, it's not good to drop litter, but look, here's these people who are repurposing, recycling.
Yeah.
Wow, what a buzzword today.
Mm.
This sort of discarded stuff. And that was it. That was the concept of the Wombles. And yet it was really simple, but really, wow, that's so easy to get, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. It really is. Yeah. I can remember the herbs as well.
Hmm.
And I didn't realize until recently when there was a documentary about his name's gone out of my head, of course, but the guy that wrote Paddington originally. The herbs,
Michael Bond.
Michael Bond. The herbs was a Michael Bond idea. I never realized that at
No,
all.
I didn't know that either.
And that's a beautiful concept.
Hmm.
Characters, based on different herbs. Wonderful.
They were great, those little sort of I think they were pre-news, weren't they? Slots
Yes.
in the old TV scheduling,
Yeah.
all those ones, Hector's House, and God, they were great. Anyway, don't get me started. That really is a tangent.
Massive. Yeah.
So, before we wrap up and
Mm.
before we get to a sort of next jumping point, the one other thing I realized I was doing in 2005 was I went back to Titan part-time to help them out on the editorial side.
Okay.
So I actually had a sort of second, few days a week slot at Titan at the time. And I think I was mostly editing their Wallace and Gromit comic book albums that they were doing.
Mm.
Ian Rimmer was writing the stories, and I was editor in charge of that line. And yeah, and so, once again, it's funny how tied up with Titan so much of my sort of career is after I went on staff with them, because I'm either freelancing for them or on staff to some degree, or we're talking about getting into partnership with them at one stage.
Mm.
you know so really, it was great. I may have left staff in 2003, but it's funny, I never really left Titan as a creator. That sort of
Yeah.
carried on.
Yeah. Yeah. No, really cool. Yeah. I'm trying to remember when it was that I went back to work for a games company. I'll find out before I bring that up too much, but that was another thing in my life. The other thing round about that period that I have to mention is because of, you know, problems I had previously and career dips and all that kind of thing, was when I first started to do a lot of like personal development seminars and all that kind of thing,
Mm.
which massively changed my approach to it all. And a lot of what I learned in those things kind of helped me get my career back on track. But it was also doing all of those that eventually led to, in some kind of way, the the kind of background content of Horizon.
Mm.
So however things are at the time, even if you don't realize it, it's always a part of your history, isn't it? It's always a part of the journey. That
Yeah,
means that later in your life, you'll look back and think, oh yeah, that was really difficult at the time, but actually this came out of it or that came out of it.
sure.
So yeah, it wasn't a complete waste.
No, no, and this is it. The great thing about these podcasts is once you start to dig, you realize, even when you think, oh, that was a gap, it wasn't really. There was a lot going on in those periods, and I tend to measure everything by my involvement with either Marvel or Transformers, and then there's bits in between. But this was a pretty brief one because, as we'll talk about, well, maybe not next time, but the time after, this is when I get contacted by Chris Ryle at IDW, who have now got the Transformers license, to
Yeah.
say, well, Simon, I'd like you involved. And I'm guessing that Chris never knew also that we had been sort of counter bidding at the time. So, sorry, Chris, but
Well, or maybe he did. Maybe it was a case of keeping your enemies closer.
something like that. Anyway, we can talk more about that next time, or as I say, the time after, because we will, in our next episode, episode 16, we will go back to our questions and answers and
Yes.
and finish off this first batch, or not, as the case may be.
Who knows? We'll see.
Mm.
Good. All right, Simon. Great as always.
Yep,
Nice
grand.
chatting. Yeah, reminded me of things I'd completely forgotten,
Yeah,
and I'm sure there's plenty more I've forgotten, but who gives a
absolutely. Well, and come back next time to hear us do some more umming and ahhing about what we were up to.
or what we think we were up to, which is
Yeah.
yeah. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. See you in a couple of weeks. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to The Rest is Giant Robots. If you enjoyed what you heard, please consider subscribing for more and maybe share with like-minded friends. This has been a Wildfur production.